Oh, look at
Oh,
that.
wow.
See, see,
How
very friendly.
Here am I with my bloody tracksuit top on.
you look really scruff now.
Well, I suppose it is the last of the classics.
I suppose you're sort of rocking that Jackie Tyler estate vibe.
Yeah.
Right.
I might actually lose this and go to a t-shirt, I think, because I don't feel that that's quite the vibe I'm trying to get. I don't think.
Oh, look, she's
hello, is he
adjusting now. She's adjusting now.
Well, I have to now on the basis that you've turned up with your bloody tie and shirt on.
Does that make you feel better?
Yes, it does.
Oh,
Although I might have to turn the radiator back on again because now it's cold again.
Oh, for God's sake.
Oh, look, you got your winter heating allowance. Use it.
Have I got time to pour a tea?
Right, okay. Bum. Hello and welcome to Talking About. We are talking about season 13 and Jason's just put his phone down. Yeah. Look alive, Jason, look alive. This is season 13, part 3 of 3. So we are going to be deciding our season winner today. I am Paul or P-Bal, and I am joined by...
Hello, it's James.
And hello, it's Jason. Getting very caught out there. I didn't think you were going to start quite so quickly as you did.
It's not quite so quickly. It's been about an hour of you doing the lottery, making tea, having a poo, everything else that needs to be done in this sort of pre-credit time. Well, very quickly.
But it's all part of my, build up to the recordings.
It is all part of your eternal charm.
Oh, he's back. Oh, love it.
Yeah, I mean it. Okay.
Just one more recording to go. Just one more.
I know. Lampshade and Ed the Duck are pit pulling for that replacement slot. I'm sort of maybe Team Ed the Ducks. I love Ed. Anyway, previously on the Talking About, our fourth placed story on 23 points is Planet of Evil. Our third place on 23.5 is The Android Invasion. I almost went a bit rishy then with my ears list this. Terror of the Zygons is our current second place on 27.5, and the current leader with 30 whole points is Doctor Who and the Pyramids of Mars.
Ooh, well.
I mean, to have 23 points and be at the bottom of the leaderboard just tells you about this season, doesn't it?
It's like Strictly, everyone's got the same score.
It's when I don't think of one single story got to 23 in season 20, did it?
Well, wow. Should we, in the oncoming weeks, come back to review our reviews? Maybe that's something we'll discuss.
Little clue there.
Anyway, today we start with... I think maybe it's the suit. It's making me do... I promise to give you the best scores that I can give you.
Are you standing for Prime Minister now?
I've got a couple of weeks before the next event. I could do it. I could fit it in.
I just think we need some plum BBC accent from you from the 1950s to go with it.
Are you picking on my diction? Are you picking on my diction?
No, I'm just, it's all the posh suit and tie, isn't it? It's.
Well, I'm going to talk like that for the rest of the video, isn't it? I mean. We respect everyone's regional dialects here, Jason. You know that.
Absolutely, we respect their dialects. Absolutely.
Their dialects.
Oh dear. Oh, we're off to a bad start, aren't we?
Oh. Right. Okay. So the first story today is The Brain of Morbius. Who's got a lovely intro for this story?
I will make a start on this just to get us underway. So we have talked on previous installments of season 13 about some of the influences that have come in during this season, and this time it is Frankenstein. And I put Frankenstein meets Time Lord mythology in this rather contentious, and we'll talk about, I'm sure, my background later on, and dark story from the pen of Robin Bland, who is in fact Robert Holmes and Terence Dicks. And yeah, it he is on the phone. Honestly, Jason. So yeah, in this sort of 4-part story, we have the Sisterhood of Khan are introduced. We have the Doctor and Sarah turning up on Khan to find that there is a mad scientist who's creating a body for a renegade Time Lord out of bits and pieces from crashed space ships. We have a callback to the Mutt. We got a Mutt in there who gets decapitated, and yeah, it's the actual story itself is quite dark. That these people have been killed off of their body parts, so that they can bring Solon can bring Morbius back to life. He's just a brain in a jar. But yeah, it's an interesting story. I'll let Jason jump in now in case I say everything he was going to say.
Oh, as if I was going to get through the recording without you saying that. James, you've said everything I was going to say there, to be honest with you. No, so we are absolutely now down into sort of real gothically dark horror. And we've got a run of stories now that really are, I think, some of the more graphic of the classic stories that we had. And this is really where season 13 builds to. The season started really strong. You built your way through with Pyramids of Mars, which, as you know, as I scored highly on the last recording. But then you get this one, and right from the get-go, even though it's a studio-bound story, and even though it's clearly had a little bit of issue in the writing, and some of the sets aren't that convincing, to be fair, but if you take away that, the story right from the go is just sublime. Again, this is just another brilliant story sitting in what I think is a brilliant season. To take something as simple as the Frankenstein concept and put your own spin on it in the way that they did with this, with the sort of I think Sarah refers to the Morbius monster as chow mein at one point, or chop suey. It's chop suey, refers to the Morbius monster as chop suey, and put your spin of Doctor Who around it. I think this is quite a feat to do this, and really for me, another one of those classic stories that I've watched probably far more times than I should have done over the years.
Heading for a 3 then when it comes to the scoring. I can feel it.
He didn't say the word pinnacle. It's all right.
No, you see, I'm getting a bit dubious about using the word pinnacle now, because the viewer has picked up on my use of the word pinnacle. But yeah, I had this story in a 60-minute video edit as it was originally released. I think this was a 60-minute one that they brought out. I think I confused this with the Seeds of Death the last time we did season 6. But yeah, this they cut all the good bits out, I felt, in the 60-minute edit as well. But it's a proper story full of good humor, but full of horror as well.
Interesting. It does look remarkably cheap, but Solon's doors flap open with a cardboardy alarm, don't they? Because is there Barry Newbury, or am I making that up? Jason's frantically Googling now so he can look as if he knows this fact.
No, I'm just trying to. I am going to have to refer here because I don't know. It is, in fact, yes, indeed, Barry Newbury.
Look at that! Come on, I had no Googles or nothing there. No Googles at all.
I admitted I was having to look there. I'm not proclaiming I knew that.
Jason, we're not talking about you. We're talking about my superior knowledge here. We're not talking about you Googling.
Well, of course, your superior knowledge always I bow to, as you know.
Good. Anyway, it does look cheap. I suppose in some ways, because there's a lot of location in the story before, a lot of location in the story after, you rob Peter and you pay Paul, and I think this does have a sort of, it does look like a sort of BBC play. It all looks a bit, this is the castle set, this is the cliff set, this is Maren set, and there's not really a lot of sense of it being a planet, is there? There are basically the sort of three locations, and I think that's one of the problems I find with this. I don't mind a studio-based story. Planet of Evil, whilst not a favourite, is studio-based, but I think you get an expanse to it. I know you get the film inserts, but you get a feeling of scale to it. This doesn't. This feels like a play. It feels very much like a play.
I certainly wouldn't, if it were me in the directorial chair on this one, I would have kept the planet dark and at night pretty much all the way through, because the minute you have those scenes where it's daytime on the planet, it shows up I think a lot of the deficiencies in the set, and quite how sort of plasticky it all looks, I think, because it is a studio bound story.
It is. A part of it does feel a little bit claustrophobic, but another part you do wonder that, you know, when the Doctor's talking to the Sisterhood about Morbius, and they say, "No, we saw him die. You know, he couldn't be here. He's literally just next door. He's just, you know, he's in the basement of the only other house on the planet. You know, it's kind of, but I guess where we're going in the next episode, and like you say, where we've been in the last one, there was a lot more of the location shooting, and they probably were budget constraints. I don't know whether that detracts though too much from the story for me. But it is, like you say, especially when it's daylight, it does look like cheap set.
Yeah,
I mean, doesn't Maren say that, and I could be wrong on this, doesn't Maren say that their powers of reading minds are so strong that even shielded minds in distant galaxies on the way here, they can burn them out before they've got anywhere near, and all this sort of stuff. So, multiple things here. A strong-willed Time Lord can hide and shield their mind. TV's Sarah Jane Smith is not a Time Lord. Neither is Solon. Neither is Kondo. So, why has no information been taken from any of these people? So they instantly assume that TV's Doctor Who is out to get their flame. Whereas if they'd burnt out Sarah Jane's mind to find out what she knew about the situation, wouldn't they have been like, oh, actually, he's quite a nice guy. He's saved lots of people. It's a shame we've just burnt her mind out and killed her. But he's a good chap. So that smacks me as a little bit of a point. I mean, the other thing, Bless, we have already mentioned earlier that there's a mutt, isn't there, at the start?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, having not so long ago suffered the mutants, did those mutants fly around in spaceships then? Or were they all just skulking in caves?
This is obviously sometime later on, because the mutts were the future generation, weren't they?
Either that, James, or they've run out of budget here and they just need
a
little bit of a stock costume. Yes.
They would get the first costume from the prop store. Oh, here you go.
Because I know Jason was worried about the Krulls doing surgery with big hands, but I'm not sure I can imagine the mutts flying a spaceship either. How would they build it? I don't know. It's only a brief moment, and it is saving money to have an old costume back. It could have just as easily, I guess, been a Sea Devil or something bizarre. But bit of Zarbi from the prop store. I don't know. Do you know? I'm gonna put my flag in the sand early doors on this, and I say that I'm not a big fan of the Brendan Morbius, and I never have been.
Oh,
well, I'm surprised by that.
I am, yeah, because you're quite a horror. You like horror a bit, don't you?
I love a horror. I love a Hammer horror. I love gosh, if Ingrid's Pits or Maddie Smith had rocked up in this, it'd have been exciting. I mean, imagine if Maddie Smith had just been one that she could have been a Hika or something, couldn't she? I don't know. Sometimes I think about 90% of your reaction to something comes to how you first see it or your impressions of seeing it as a child. Like I remember, this to me was what I watched on a rainy Sunday afternoon, knowing that I wanted to play Lego, but knowing I've got homework to do, and it was raining outside, and it was a bit depressing. And I don't know if that's never quite left me.
It's the trauma. You just, when you watch it again, you're like, I want to play with Lego.
I would love to play with Lego. My Doctor Who Lego.
Doctor Who Lego. I
made my own, kids. This is pre-Hartnell Doctor's generation now. I had to make my own. None of this nonsense of buying it. I had to make my little console room and everything.
I did have my own Lego TARDIS console that I built. I've got the proper one when it came out on Lego Designs, but I have one that I built myself. There we go, nerdy.
Right, Jason just spends hundreds on Star Wars Lego.
Oh, absolutely. Why not?
I don't know why you went Leslie Phillips on that.
Well, I wasn't channeling Leslie Phillips there, or maybe I slipped into that sort of BBC English there. You never know.
It could have just been a memory of being at school with him or something.
Yeah.
Rude.
So Brain and Morbius, I mean, character-wise, I like again, I don't like the it's going to be Deadly Assassin Mark 2, and I have to answer all of this. I think Cynthia Grenville's amazing. I think considering she's playing like 600 years old, she's playing mega old, but she's not old there. But she has that kind of quality, doesn't she? And that gravel,
Yeah.
I mean, when she did the Phantom events, she did have the phrase "Call me Cindy," which was a bit more friendly than Myron, isn't it? Call me Cindy. And I think my favourite Cynthia Grenville thing is completely unrelated to the actual story, is actually the Tom Baker years when Tom's trying to remember her name. That she was definitely called Sheila. It was Sheila. And the credit comes up as Cynthia Grenville. The golden moment from the Tom Baker years. That's all we had in 1992, folks. What does everyone else think of the cast then?
Well, I got to admit, I am a very big fan of Philip Maddock, and I do think his portrayal of Solon in this is very well done throughout, and it's the sort of performance I think that you've come to expect, and we've gotten used to from Philip and his several previous appearances in Doctor Who. It just got it's a certain gravitas about him when I think he's on screen, and certainly an actor, I think, for me in the classic years that has stood out whenever he's appeared in Doctor Who.
Yeah, and he's mad scientist, but not mad scientist, isn't he? He's quite controlled at times, which again, is a really good trait, especially as he is this, evil genius who's creating this body in the background. There are parts where he is trying to be very persuasive, like when he interrupts the doctor's execution, and he's just like, don't do it. He kind of underplays it in places, which is really important, I think, to get the nuance of the character. I quite like, and I can't remember his name for the life of me, the guy who plays the manservant as well. Because I think, when he realizes that his arm is part of Morbius's created body, that there's that moment of realization, because all the way, earlier on in the story, it's positioned that Soren's going to sort him out a new arm, and there was damage to the old one. But actually it's on the Morbius body, and that's the point where he starts to rebel against his master effectively, and that's the shades of Frankenstein come in there, where you've got that sort of the servant turns against the master,
and he takes a little liking to Sarah as well.
He does take a little liking to Sarah, yes, and ultimately he sacrifices himself, doesn't he, to save Sarah. He's shot when he rebels, and then he dies trying to save Sarah. So the guy that looks monstrous actually is the guy that tries to save Sarah. It's quite. I like that.
He doesn't save the mutt though, does he? He's quite willing to decapitate mutt.
He's quite willing to kill the mutt. But you often will find that especially in Frankenstein films, where the creature will fall in love with Frankenstein's niece, or some female character in the plot, and end up rebelling because of that. So I think that's a nice addition to the story.
The actual shooting of Kondo is very graphic. But
yes.
I mean, this is the kiddos at tea time. His chest, though, his stomach explodes.
It explodes. Yeah, and Christopher Barry in one of the commentaries said actually that was probably too much, with the blood sort of exploding outwards was probably a step too far. I mean, we're kind of starting to get into the Mary Whitehouse sort of Doctor Who is too violent, and I know we've discussed this in other reviews of Tom's later seasons, but we're just starting to the point where that's being noticed. The graphic violence is being noticed, and I think.
Well, I think she's been going for a while then, because she did. Tomb had a bit of a hammering, didn't it? I think some of the Troutons. I think she probably steps it up here, because she actually gets to the point where they edit Deadly Assassin, because she's So yeah, it's been a long time coming, but she got there in the end. She got there.
But yeah, so and as you say, Jason, this is the start, or we've already been talking about it getting darker and darker and darker, and this is probably the first experience of a graphic killing in the way that this is done.
I think Kondo does basically threaten to sort of decapitate Solon, doesn't he? He has him pinned to the thing, and he's like, I'll do for you, mate. So there's quite a few sort of bits of graphic, visceral sort of horror in this. But I mean, the one thing I think that always strikes me as a bit. I also think I've got further to move through the story than I have. Is because the cliffhangers for 2 and 3 are quite. So you get the bubbling tank that's like, oh, you're one of the sisters, you come to kill me. And then you get that, I can see again, and he's there. So it's kind of like those two to me were always a bit kind of like, oh, I'm an episode back from where I hoped I was. I think that's one of the things I'm not so struck on with this.
I mean, when Sarah Jane is blinded, I think Liz Sladen does that really, really well, and I do like the build. When she finds the brain of Morbius and is blind, so can't actually see it, but Morbius thinks that she's there to kill him. So again, I like that concept, and I think Liz does blind. Is that I don't know whether that's the right thing to say, but she does blind quite well. It's quite believable that she is blind by that point.
Get your lovely violets. Great line. It's a great line. I still something that doesn't quite. I mean, the other sort of morally questionable moment that I suppose we need to discuss is TV's Doctor Who decides he's going to gas Morbius, and he gasses Solon. I mean, I don't know. This is because the next story is also a little bit kung pao for TV's Doctor Who, and I know there's always that sort of unspoken thing that he sort of does do things a little bit, but he doesn't. There's just something a bit season 22 about gassing someone to death somehow.
But is it more that it's a bit? Is it an artifact, if you like, of what this season is? Because it has turned the dial up, hasn't it? We've said too many times now. I think everybody knows this, but is it not part of the way that the show is now being written and essentially produced? Is that he was looking for more? I know Philip was looking to have Tom pretty much central in every story, and you're still at that point where you're still trying to differentiate this Doctor from the previous Doctor. And you just wondered if it's just an artifact coming out from the writing that he's just turned up his own the own level of violence, if you like, that's coming out.
I think with the third Doctor, with John Pertwee, it was, yes, it was quite physical, but it was normally to disable someone rather than to kill them. It was normally, a chop to the head and they were knocked out, rather than actually manufacture their death. With Tom, in this, particularly in this story, he does manufacture the death. There's a reason for, he is trying to stop Morbius, and there's lots of lots of build up to that, but he does manufacture it, and he is more hands-on in that respect. He's not there's lots of sort of physicality, he trips people up with his scarf, and and there are points where he does knock people out, but it's kind of moving in a more dark place.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it though, if you think about a story like Horror of Fang Rock, where pretty much the body count's really high, as we know in that one, the Doctor is again quite complicit. Or in that story, for example, he knows that pretty much every one of these people in the lighthouse is going to cop it at some point along the line. So he's not necessarily acting that out. He's not making that happen. It's happening around him.
Not thinking Fang Rock though. He tells them how to survive it, and he knows that if they don't do what they're following, which the human reaction is to not follow what he's doing, they will get killed. Like Lord Palmerdale, where he dies because of his greed for going back for the diamonds on the stairs and all that stuff. Whereas sort of the action of killing Morbius, the gassing thing, and maybe it's the action of gassing him, because it's not like it's part of a unit thing where TV's Doctor, it all blows up at the end and you say to Brigadier, well, that's terrible that happened, but it's quite convenient because it means the monster's not coming back next week. There's a sort of thing of him and Sarah sort of wafting up the show saying, this will do for him. We've sorted the chemistry set out. It's kind of, I don't know, because we've had Doctor Who, have I got the right to kill the Daleks? The year before, you can stand with the two strands, say, do I have the right to kill these people? Am I the right person to decide this? To then a year later be like, Morbius, yeah, get me the gas, he's gone.
Yeah, I see it. I think it's just I think it's just the writing right now at this point in the series.
I think I think it's in keeping with the story. The story is quite dark and quite graphic, so I don't think it's a step for the character of the Doctor, but in the narrative of the story, I think that Frankenstein is always going to, well, not if you watch the Hammer horror films, because he pops up again 2 years later in a different guise. But the Frankenstein is always going to be defeated at the end, and is normally either killed by the villagers or by the actual creature itself. So I think the fact that Soren dies, that to me that fits in with the narrative of the story. The way that they go about doing it, I would say is open to debate. I don't think it's out of step with the story, personally. But
so the opening of the story, when TV's Doctor is quite angry that he's been sent there by the Time Lords, which is quite a nice little monologue bit for Tom. Now, question here, folks, and give me your theories as you will. How the Time Lords sent TV's Doctor Who to Khan to help clean out the chimney for the Sisterhood, or because they think Morbius is still alive and he needs to sort that out? Because either way, I can't help thinking if they needed to send a Time Lord to clean the chimney out, they could have let the very empathetically sort of psychic Sisterhood know that they were going to help with this situation, even though they don't apparently need the flame very often unless Paul McGann's about to turn up. Or if they knew Morbius was already there, again, why didn't they tell the Sisterhood, by the way, we thought we'd bump Morbius off, but that only house on the planet that's next to you with the mad scientist that's collecting all the body parts that you've not put two and two together here for, he's in the basement. So
Oh, go on, Jason. Go
I
on.
was going to say, there's a third theory here as well, though. The Time Lords knew that one of the Mutts had got off the planet, and they just needed to mop everything up, really, before so they could finish the mutant storyline.
I think doesn't the sister they part of the story is that when they explain that they've stopped sending the salve or whatever it is they make to the Time Lords, they cut themselves off from the Time Lords, hadn't they? That because they were accusing them of somehow influencing the flame, and that's why the Doctor was there, was to try and re-establish communication with them to find out what was going on.
I'm not quite. I don't know. It seems a bit because they think he's come to steal the flame, don't they?
Yeah.
But isn't that because they've stopped supplying them?
But he says that they've only ever intermittently wanted it in the rarest of occasions. So is that implying that the poor sisterhood are overreacting to everyone that's coming? I mean, basically, they are a bit psychotic, because they're killing anything that comes near. So that's a strange subplot, that the whole of anything that comes remotely near their galaxy, they're destroying the ships, and that's quite a sort of unfulfilled plot strand.
It's always been my take that it was that the Time Lords directed him there because they knew of Morbius's brain being there, or the existence of Morbius. So that's how I've always read it all over the years, that was what it was.
But then, doesn't it say that the whole fleet of Time Lords and the sisterhood were required to fight together to overcome Morbius and his rebellious horde? And
they always send the Doctor in whenever they don't want to get their hands dirty, though, don't they? So that's just another example of that.
I've ever sent the War Doctor in. Not the War Doctor, the Fugitive Doctor. I'm mixing all my spin-off Doctors now.
Oh, don't start about spin-off Doctors. We've got all that to come yet.
Well, I suppose we and this is the funny thing, isn't it? Because when I was a little me and I used to watch this, it was always the idea that the other Doctors, when you saw Pertwee and Troughton and Hartnell, like, those are your pre-Tom incarnations. Everything else is Morbius. Not now. Not now. Everyone's like, yeah, Philip Hinchcliffe's the Doctor.
Oh, you can see where Chris Chibnall got his idea from, can't you?
They're all canon because they were all in that flashback sequence from Jodie.
Are all of those ones in the background canon, do you think, there, James?
These are all canon. All of these are canon. Absolutely. We're all pre-Hartnell Doctors now.
That does mean it's £100 to have a photo or an autograph with me, because I love meeting my fans. It's just I want you to spend that sort of money on me.
Well, it's how you can afford your flashy suit.
It's true. It's 150 if you have me in a costume from one of the recordings, though. I'm sorry.
In case I want you back in the Roman outfit that you wore when we reviewed the Hartnell era.
I'll give it a clean up and bring it to Pandora. I am joking. It is entirely immaculate.
This was very contentious and remained contentious, and probably still is in some quarters, around what those faces represented, because you're right, it many people read it that they were Morbius's previous incarnations, and within the narrative of the story that made perfect sense. You saw the previous Doctors, and then you in this battle that they were having, you saw the previous Morbiuses. But Philip Hinchcliffe always wanted to leave that open. He wanted to leave it open to question. But then I guess what we've now got, because of the Chibnall story around the Timeless Child, is actually a sort of new narrative that says that these are pre-Hartnell Doctors, because they feature in the flashback with Jodie when she's in the Matrix. They go through all of the established TV ones. Then you've got the Fugitive, you've got the War Doctor, the children in the flashback sequences that have regenerated, the whole lot, and then these faces as well. So, I mean, I know there are some people out there who absolutely hate the idea of pre-Hartnell doctors, and Hartnell was the first one, and and I totally respect that. There are others who say, no, these were many years before, and these are previous incarnations of the Doctor just doesn't know about.
And all I'll say, James, here at this point is Philip Hinchcliffe was, I believe, advising Chris Chibnall behind the scenes during his tenure on Doctor Who. So who's to say that this wasn't just a clever little ploy that Philip said to Chris, "Oh, use some of my timeless Doctor idea here, and we can run with it."
Where's the notion that Philip was advising Chris come from?
Oh, yes, of course. Isn't that common knowledge?
Oh, Jason's got his insider knowledge.
Jason, are you making things up now?
No, I am absolutely convinced that I have had a discussion with somebody at some point over the course of time where I believe Philip was not an advisor on the show, but he came in, I think, to help Chris a little bit with some of the just some suggestions, I believe.
I mean, I wouldn't want to name drop, but when I was talking to Philip the other week, he said he hadn't really seen any of the recent stuff with Chris.
Then I was definitely
what he had seen, he hadn't particularly liked. So, unless he was pouring scorn on his own work, I think that might be slightly made up story there, Jason.
Well, James has got away with it so many times. It's worth me getting away with it once in a while.
Oh.
If I was wearing pearls, I'd be clutching them right now.
Shots were fired. He's like the Sisto de Khan taking the ships down now. He's like, let's take him down with me.
I mean, because who else is in there? Because it's Graham Harper.
Right, Graham Harper's there. Douglas Camfield's there, I think. Yeah. Chris Barry, George Galatio's there, isn't he? I mean, there was a lot of trouble at the time because they weren't equity members. Wasn't there a bit of a kick? They just sort of. I mean, the thing that I find hilarious is basically that those guys were just, for want of a better phrase, dicking about in the clothing cupboard for a laugh, sort of thing. Really, I mean, that's what they were doing. Let's dress up like this. I want to be a Cavalier. Wouldn't that be funny? But I think all the years later, Doctor Who fans are going to be like, right, so the Cavalier Doctor would have come after the small child time. It's like, oh no, it's like, and I love and I respect everything in that sense. But it is funny that what was basically a laugh after a few drinks at the BBC bar at lunchtime has become quite an issue for people.
Big, I know, and I think I'm at one of our events not that long ago. I think I was with Graham Harper, and I was like, "So how does it feel to now be officially a doctor?" And he just looked at me and went, I was just like, you can charge more.
Well, yeah. One of the incarnations who shall be named, so when asked that question, said, "Does that mean I can charge more if I'm a doctor now?" Not really. No.
I do find it amazing, though, that something that happened. I mean, how long ago was this story?
1876.
Yeah, is still rumbling on within fandom about whether or not it's these are pre-Hartnell doctors or not. It just. I love that Doctor Who has got the that kind of history and sort of myth about it that you probably you probably only find with a show that's gone on for so long. We're coming up to the 60th. That then future producers then can go back to and go, they've been talking about this for like 30 years. Let's bring it back in. Let's make it canon. And it's just bonkers. But
it could be a spin-off in the waiting here for the new world.
Well, yes.
I mean, I like the fact that when I think when they did Night of the Doctor with Paul McGann and they brought the sisterhood back, it's a quite an obscure thing to bring back, but it's quite a nice thing and it fits with the sort of the sacred flame and that was nice. But when they brought it back for, I'm not good on the title, is it a Hellbent, Heaven Sent?
Yes.
At it. It was just basically like she was just skulking around on Gallifrey looking a bit miserable. It was a really odd thing of, they're actually quite an interesting concept. And you've got that kind of, it's nice when you have these sort of Time Lords of got strange allegiances with other planets that they have to do this or that, and that's quite a nice thing to use. So when they bring things back, they should bring them back for the right reason and handle them properly. And yeah, Night of the Doctor, great. I think the other version of a bit lame.
Hmm.
And sadly, no Gillian Brown in Night of the Doctor. That's what I was gutted by. I wanted Gillian Brown with the. She does a great line in that, doesn't she? I'm left hanging there with the camera whilst they're doing their Gillian Browns. Then that was they're doing their Ohikas.
Okay, we'll give it a go.
Oh, it didn't go back to Jason.
It didn't go back. I can't give it a go. Oh.
Oh, mein way. Right.
We're almost there.
Almost there. We're living on a prayer. Yeah. What haven't we discussed? So have we got any exciting and exotic facts from James that Jason can verify or not?
We've talked about them as we've gone through. I mentioned at the beginning about Robin Bland because it was mainly rewritten by Robert Holmes, but Terence Dicks didn't want his name to it because it was his original script, and he didn't like the fact that it had been mostly rewritten, so they came up with the name of Robin Bland. And I believe in one of the books, Sarah Jane uses the surname Bland as a disguise, which is in relation to this. But they went with the pseudonym because although Holmes had mostly rewritten it, normally it would go in whoever was the started it, but Dix didn't want his name to it.
He said put some Bland pseudonym on it, didn't he?
They were like, okay, Robin Bland.
See, my top hot fact then, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't normally give someone's email address out here, but Terence Dix's email address was Bland Robin.
Oh, was it?
Wow.
That's. I mean, you're not going to get an answer now if you email. But yeah, that was his email address, which was always really quite funny. When it popped up, it'd be like, oh, all these years later, he's got that. He's on with the joke, and that's cool.
Yeah, he actually found it reasonably funny. He was. Although he wasn't happy with the rewrite, he felt the pseudonym was appropriate. So
the royalty check was all right. So
he got to put his name to the book, at the target book, I suppose, at the very least.
And the junior version. Do you remember there's a junior Brain of Morbius, isn't there? The story of the Brain of Morbius lends itself well to a junior audience, I feel. A bit of gassing, a little bit of decapitation, a little bit of shooting, a bit of blinding. Ooh.
Dearie, the mutt was dead to begin with.
It's like Spot the Dog in Space, isn't it? It's just for kids. Okay, well, let's go for some scores from Doctor and the Brain of Morbius then, shall we? And dear viewer, don't forget to troll James if you're upset that he's not dressed as a member of the Sisterhood. Just putting it out there.
Okay, I will go first. I do enjoy this story. There's a lot, and I feel like I'm repeating myself from previous reviews about the Hammer influence and the horror. It for me, it is all in keeping with the way the show is going. If you're watching it, as you go through the episodes, they're starting to get darker. The Doctor's getting more drawn into things, and yeah, I think I remember saying to Jason, "Oh my god, it's like a six-parter," because I just remember my first time watching this, it felt like there was a lot more to it than the 4 episodes because of the dynamic. And there's a lot of sort of like escaping and recapturing, but I thought it was a longer sort of epic story. But I do really like it, and so I scored it a 9.
A 9, he says.
9.
That's NINE, not NEIN.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
I have put it on my pad. I'm just going to go and boil the kettle whilst Jason gives us his summary.
Okay, then. So I'm not going to. What are you? It started already. James, what is that?
Well, I'm just having a sandwich.
Okay, so I agree with actually a lot of what James just said. Interestingly, this is a continuation of what I think is it's the best season, I think, of Doctor Who. I can quite honestly say that. And okay, there are some downsides, but let's face it, I think that the premise of the story and the tightness of the 4-part storyline for me works really, really well. Yeah, you know, I could be very critical of the planet sets. But I'm not really going to be, because for me, this is one that I've watched over and over. It is gothic horror, really, all the way through. And you know, I've always had a little bit of a passion for the Universal sort of, you know, the black and white sort of Frankensteins and Draculas. That's the kind of horror I can watch. I'm not into all this modern horror particularly. So I've got an affinity, I think, in this story to kind of the horror genre that I really, really enjoy. Not the pinnacle of the previous story, and therefore I am absolutely agreeing with James's score and coming in with a very, very strong 9.
Hang on, you said the pinnacle of the previous story, which you scored 1 point less.
Yeah, that's fine.
You said it's not as strong as the pinnacle of the previous story, which you scored a point less.
No, I scored 10, didn't I? The previous story.
The last story was Doctor Who and the Android Invasion, my darling.
Oh, I forget, of course. Yes. Well, I was on about the Pyramids of Mars there for the clarity of our viewer.
Yeah, nobody else. Okay. Right. Well, do you know what? This is your Zygon moments, boys. I'm genuinely not sold on the Brendan Morbius. I don't hate it. I don't hate it with a passion. I just don't engage with it. I don't want to watch it. And it surprises me somewhat, because I think Philip's doing a Philip performance, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think he does better performances elsewhere, so he's sort of slightly dialed in with it. Sisterhood don't particularly do anything apart from skulk about and do a bit of pans peopling. I just find the whole thing a bit bland. I'm genuinely with Uncle Terence here. I think it's a bland old thing. I don't hate it. There are nice little bits for Liz. I think it loses something from not having enough Doctor Who and Sarah Jane together stuff, because I think they are the energy and the spark. Heartbreaking performance of Colin Fay and all that. But no, I find it a bit dreary, a bit bland, and I have given Doctor Who and the Brain of Morbius 5.
I honestly thought you were going to go lower than They're going to say 2.
5 points for Doctor Who, both regular and junior, on the Brain of Morbius front, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's not the pinnacle of the season for me.
Well, where's James gone? He's disappeared. We just had his name flashing across the screen there. I'm not quite sure what he was up to.
I think we're going to have a transformation here. I think he's going to. I don't think it's going to be a pre-Hartnell Doctor, but it might be something related to the next story that we're going to go to. Anyway, dear viewer, if you are keeping track of the scores, and you know, nobody says anything nice about me below anyway, so I don't care. 5 points to Seed of Doom gives it 23 points overall.
Wow, I'm surprised that's come as low as that.
As low as that? That's 23 points out of 30. What's wrong with you? It's like everyone doesn't end the day on 28 points. It's like, oh no, what's wrong? It's like, was that a good dance? No, 8.
I do think Strictly have taken the my scoring method this season, haven't they? There's some very random scores coming out.
I think they need a little bit more P-Bal on that, and a bit more about what was that? What even style was that? Yeah. The Be Kind thing's done with now. I'm over it.
Oh, okay. We're back for the final story then.
We are. Well, anyway, the last story, and I'm hoping that James does come back for this, Otherwise, I just got to talk to Jason, and it might be the end in more ways than one. The end of the season, we have got the Seeds of Doom, which, as James isn't here, oh, Gordon Bennett, he's back.
Sorry, I just had to go and change.
You see, the terrible thing is with all that, and I'm fiddling away here, is that because obviously I'm dressed in a suit, aren't I? I'm very formal because it is the end of days, and I can't do an awful lot here. I'm squeezing in.
You've got the gloves. Oh,
you see, I think it's incredible how much of a villain there.
I feel like I should be asking you for some money for my painting.
Is that pounds?
I'm not sure what's going on here though, because I'm in trouble.
Be careful, Jason. If you get pollen on that shirt, it won't come out in the wash.
It won't. Oh Jesus, hang on. Oh, I swore.
My word! If you heard that expletive at home, ladies and gentlemen, we are very sorry for the potty mouth in Cardiff. We might have to bleep that.
Yes, we'll have to get the edit done, but I just need to.
I want a Matrix noise. I want a. Where's he gone now? He's gone to put it outside in case it grows and kills him.
Oh.
I think we were hoping for some sort of introduction from him before he disappeared to home base.
It's coming. Hang on.
Nothing but professional. Nothing but.
Obviously, of course, nothing but professional. Okay, so the Seeds of Doom. Not in fact the Seeds of Doom. In fact, not in fact the Seeds of Death, as I thought it was going to be. No, I'm not using that gag. Okay, Seeds of Doom. So we have got to the end of season 13, and we're going out on a bit of a high here. If there was ever a story that could persuade you not to be vegan, it's the Seeds of Doom, because quite honestly, this is where the plants take over, and it is quite it's quite the end of the season for me. It's playing again on the gothic horror element of it all the way through. It is a brilliantly devised 6-part story, split nicely actually into a 2-4 combination, with the sort of scenes or the sort of first couple of episodes set on the Antarctic base. The rest of the episodes then set at Chase's manor, and you know, we've got some really nasty crinoids here on the run, and the horror level goes up and up and up, and boy, does this story deliver.
Yeah, I think this has shades of so many different things. I mean, yes, you've got the horror aspect. The beginning when they're in Antarctic is a bit like The Thing. You know, they find this mysterious pod in the ice. It infects someone and starts to change them. You've got Chase, who's like, you know, almost like a Bond villain. He's very maniacal. He's got his own henchman, Scorby, who's, you know, brilliantly portrayed by John Challis in a really sort of, yeah, he's this killer essentially. You know, he's just like I'm gonna clean everything up so there's no evidence. And it's a great story. It, like you say, it is, the first part is sort of like based on Siege kind of thing, where, you know, they find the pod, the scientist starts to change, and then Scorby turns up and tries to steal the other pod and then kill off everybody, and they end up blowing it up. And then you've got the point where they're at the house and Chase is starting to experiment with the other pod, and like you say, the crinoid starts to sort of germinate and escape. And it's a really, you know, it's a really quite fast-paced 6-part story. There is a lot of capture, recapture, escape, capture, recapture, but the characters are really dark. You know, the composter is I mean, you know, even when they take the Doctor to just look at it, you know, it's like, this is what could happen to you. You know, this is, you know, everything, all the waste gets put into here and mulched up and sprayed on the garden. And there are lots of deaths in this as well. You know, the body count in this one is quite high. And not only is, you know, the Doctor and Sarah trying to fend off from Scorby and Chase, but also, as you say, these carnivorous plants that start to grow and, you know, take over towards the end of the story. So you've got, you know, kind of Attack of the Triffids in there. There's shades of Avengers stories in there. There's just so many influences, but I think they come together as a cracking story with some brilliant performances.
Because I mean, Robert Banks-Stewart was writing the Avengers at the time they did the Man-Eater of Surrey Green, and there's a definite ring of that in this story. Sylvia Coleridge is in The Girl from Auntie, playing a very similar sort of Batty. I mean, that's a sort of shtick, isn't it? But this is where it sort of comes through. The funny thing about Harrison Chase is he is that kind of it's that level of Doctor Who villain where they're bad, but they're only bad if you're not on their terms. As he sees the world, he's not trying to do something wrong, and that's the interest. That's when Doctor Who villains are sort of at their peak, isn't it? When what they aren't going, I'm going to destroy the world because I know that's a really bad thing to do. It's like, actually, you know what? I'm really into plants. Plants are where I'm at, and humans are the bad guys here. So I like that kind of that when it's because then I know, and unless I'm misremembering here, like Jason, when Mark Gatiss had to show Diana Rigg examples of good Doctor Who villaining, he chose this, and Julian in City of Death, and it is that thing where I think where they just know what they're doing. That he's not bad, he's doing bad things, but not in his world, and he's. I don't think Tony Becker loses it at any point, does it? I mean, even when he goes crazy, he's still within his sphere of sort of normal, and he's very calm, and yeah, it's an incredible performance, I think.
He is, and you're right. It's because it's like, you know, we've seen other villains where they have gone large, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But this is so controlled, and he is so manipulating and calculated, you know, around everyone around him, you know, and he is not afraid to use Scorby to get what he wants, but he will, you know, the way he manipulates some of the characters in the story to find out where the pod is, and, you know, he then threatens him with his pension and things like, you know, it's not like he's holding a gun to him saying, tell me where it is. He's very subtle with his manipulation. He knows how to pull people's strings to get what he wants. And with the, you know, when he confronts the Doctor, it's not that sort of maniacal villain. It is like two powerful forces against each other. You know, we'll talk about the ending later on, I'm sure, but you know, there is that between the two, and whenever they sort of cross paths, there's just sort of that, almost like they're equal. And I know obviously the Doctor's a lot older and different species and everything, but there is that sort of, you know, begrudging respect for each other. Whereas when you see him with Scorby, you know, he's like, oh, well, you're just a henchman who will just kill anything, you know, and he treats him with a lot less respect, you know, until they get forced to work together. You know, so you really see a difference in the dynamics.
And it is very much the way it's played here. And he is clearly in his own world as well. He's completely single-mindedly driven by the sort of his sort of desire, I suppose, to make plants or the plant life on the planet the you know, the main thing. But he obviously doesn't set out like that. Obviously, that transpires as it comes through. But as a villain, it's sublime. It's note perfect all the way through, down to playing the music to the plants, and the whole sort of he's right. He gets all the heavy men to do all of his deeds that he wouldn't dare to touch with his own hands, and he is completely in control of his own world, and everything that happens is invading his world. And I think that's what really brings out the villain in him here.
Although this week we discovered that it's better for plants to be spoken to by ladies, isn't it, than men?
Yes.
It was a scientific study this week, folks.
Mm.
I mean, I can sort of sympathise with Chase, really, because actually, I don't think I've ever had one of my plants lie to me, whereas people do that. They do that incessantly. So I think actually I'm quite happy to take a plant over a person, I think. Maybe it's my ultimate. Maybe that's my ultimate destiny.
You're going to turn into him.
Yeah. Forget the lampshade. 2 plants on for the next recording.
The fact that even when things go really start to take a turn, and the crinoid starts affecting the plants around the house, he's out there taking photos of it. He's just quite calmly strolling around the grounds taking photos. You're right. He's very single-minded. He is in his own place, if you like. When he doesn't get angry, he just goes and plays music to plants. I
mean, Jay, he's back on the text again. He's been on his phone like a teenage girl all night. The Amelia Ducar character is quite interesting in that it's quite a funny piece of play, isn't it? But Philip didn't like it, did he? When he novelized, he ditched it, didn't he? It's gone from the book.
He thought it was filler. And so when, like you say, when he wrote the book, he pretty much cancelled out most of it. I mean, in the story, it's really because they escape, don't they? Because they get picked up, and then the chauffeur tries to kill them, so they knock the chauffeur out, and then find her painting in the back, and that's in the boot of the limousine, which is how they end up sort of finding Amelia Ducat, and she's sort of sent in, isn't she, as this sort of could you go in and find out what's going on, and I actually quite like that. I think there's something very British about sending in an eccentric old lady like Miss Marple, or not necessarily as sharp as Miss Marple, who sort of goes in, has a sort of wander around, finds Sarah, and then walks out and says, "Oh yeah, they're in trouble." It's kind of. And again, that it weirdly reminds me of Goldfinger, where they go into the farm when Bond is captured, and they go into the farm to sort of try and find out what's going on. So they produce Bond so that they walk away and go, "Oh yeah, everything's fine." It's that kind of send someone in and find out what's happening, because we don't know on the outside. I do like the character. I mean, she's very eccentric, and it fits in quite nicely, I think.
It plays as like relief to the story as well, and I kind of like that, because you've got a really dark scenario throughout this as it builds, and then you have this little bit of fun where she comes in and she's playing amateur sleuth, and even at the end with Colin Thackeray, and she goes, "Oh, and I'll be available if you need me again. I'll come and be on the next mission with you," or whatever it is. And she's just, I think it's perfectly played and fits really well into this story.
There's a great picture that went around sort of Facebook, Twitter, of someone who'd done a fake adventure series with Damaris Heyman and Sylvia and Daphne, and I don't know what they called it, but it was a good look. I mean, that would have been a spin-off I'd have watched, but that's just more about my camp sensibilities, doesn't it? Unit are sort of in this again. We've had a bit of unit chat and a couple of sort of stories on this. They're in it, but
They might as well not be unit, though. This is what I said further back in one of the earlier recordings for this season. You know, our last unit story is much earlier, realistically, and we're into the army are involved here. And it is a shame that we couldn't have had one last swan song with the unit regulars. That would have, for me, have made it a proper unit story.
I mean, Nicholas Courtney was invited back, wasn't he? And he wasn't available. So there was talk that they were going to put a short scene in at the end, towards the end of the story, where the Brigadier was going to be in it. But I think without the regulars, unit becomes just a background thing. It's like a nice to have, but it doesn't really. I mean, it's the RAF that bombed the house in the end. You know, they sort of force their way in and clear a path. But I think there is an element that, yeah, it would have been nice to have seen someone that we knew from unit rather than just a generic unit force.
Even down to if you'd have had the same situation that you had in the Android invasion, the same replacement and all that, it would have just, for the sake of how close those stories are together, you could have had the two, a little bit of caution. I mean, again, this is one of the reasons I'm a bit like this with this story. Look, I'm already here on this. I'm ready for a vote. The laser gun thing, that they just basically mince around the lawns a bit with the laser gun that doesn't do anything. That is filler. That is very blatant filler. I mean, we all like they're shooting at it, the bullets won't stop it. What are we going to do? It's like, well, let's mince around with our laser guns for a bit and then just blow it up with bigger missiles anyway. Hell. And also, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm if you blew up a plant and that was reproducing in that manner, would it have not spread all over the luscious green?
Well, they killed the other one, don't they? I mean, this is probably my little niggle is why didn't they realise that sooner? Because the Scorby blew up the base in Antarctic, and that's what killed the first crinoid. And they seem to take a long time in the second part of the story to remember that actually blowing it up does kill it. Because they seem to be going, like you say, they do bring in the laser. They try and get rid of it that way, but it seems to take a long time to sort of come to the realization that, do you know what, we blew the other one up, so why can't we do that with this one?
And the crinoid, when it starts talking, is one of those like, oh, why is the crinoid talking to you all now? Like, oh, I preferred it when it was just a kind of a bit of plantage that was going to kill you. When it has to stop and explain its planty plot, it becomes a bit, oh, I'm not keen on that. Do you like the crinoid chat in the cottage?
It's part of the story. It's got to communicate.
It doesn't talk again
after,
does it? But does it need to communicate? Because basically, it's plant life, and what it is doing is it's growing and it's reproducing and it's trying. At what point do we need this pod to be like? Where has it got its speech systems from?
Well, it's grown from a human, so I'm assuming it would.
But I mean, that human's very, very low down in the situation. It's not made human. I mean, has it made little plant larynx? It all becomes a bit. I don't think we need the crinoid to chat.
You know, it could have been like an Audrey 2 and just burst out into song towards the
end. And I mean the other point, and again, I'm like Mary Whiteass now. I am. It's that point where like, right, what we're going to show you now is how to make a Molotov cocktail. If children at home would like to throw explosives, this is how we're going to show you to do it. She
didn't like that, did she?
I don't blame her. It's really strange that you would show it so obviously.
She didn't like the strangulation either, you know, where people were being strangled by plants. Or by people. So there were, she was quite vocal about this story. I mean, it is, you know. Oh, go on.
Like I say, Doctor punches the chauffeur in the face. It's slowed down, so it properly shows that he's punching him in the face. It's not a bit of a Edo or anything.
It is a horribly violent story. People are being dispatched in all sorts of horrible ways.
Scorby drowning. I mean, that in itself, the scene where Scorby's underneath and the plant comes over the top of him and drags him down. This is proper horror here.
I mean, I always found Scorby's thing a little bit like you could just sort of see the net being pulled on him.
Yeah.
I was never sure of the Scorby death. I always felt a bit, he sort of run into the paddling pool and they pulled the net on him.
The chase death. I mean, originally, the original script had basically the Doctor pushing him in, which they modified because they were like, we can't really be seen as having the Doctor shove someone into a chipper. But it is a weird ending because they have that tussle and then he kind of just staggers backwards and he's off. And again, you don't see that, but you know what's just happened. You know that he's just been put through that grinder. It's not that kind of grinder, Jason. It's always one, isn't there, that brings the tone down. He's giggling away like a school kid now. There's always one, but it's a really grim end to him. You could say it's poetic because he ends up nurturing the plants in the garden. And I'm sure he would have loved to have gone out that way, but it is, that the dispatching of people in this story is quite bad.
They are quite canny with the composter, aren't they? If you were dragged through those reels and crunched to death, it would be quite a splatter. There'll be a lot of something in there. That would be dripping with blood. So previous week we had Kondo exploding when he was shot, but they've obviously thought it's a bit much to show blood on the cogs here.
Yeah,
presumably. I don't know whether is it a good idea. I don't know. Is that better or not than bone meal? Is it the same sort of setup? I don't know. No. I bought mulch this week to do the garden. I'm just wondering whether I should have started pushing people through instead.
Oh no!
Jason's not here next week, and my roses are looking really healthy. I wouldn't put Jason there. The alcohol content would burn the leaves.
Oh, we're back.
Well, I have to email David Austin. What kills your flowers? Alcohol poisoning.
I'm saying nothing.
Well, actually, on the subject of that, because that reminds me, my 40th, I went to David Austin. We went to Athelhampton House, which is the location here. We used our Gardener's World 2-for-1 entry voucher. Yeah. When you get to 40, you have to be a savvy middle-aged saver. But if you haven't, I mean, sometimes going to a Doctor Who location is a bit of a you go there and you can just about see what the house was or what, it's one of those I think I can vaguely see it. Athelhampton, you can absolutely see it is like going around Harrison Chase's house because it is still a big house with lovely gardens. So if you are down that neck of the woods, which is sort of down Southampton-ish, somewhere down that. We were near Weymouth, so that's if you're down that way near Weymouth, then you can either go and see Winspit Quarry and investigate the destiny of the Daleks, or you can go to Athelhampton House and then you can have a nice cup of tea and a scone if you want to.
Sounds lovely.
And you can run around the box hedges and pretend that you're being chased by a Crinoid or John Chalice or whatever you fancy doing. We have all not mentioned here, though, that the Crinoid costume in part is a green up and a reuse of the old Axon.
Yeah, so a bit more of the BBC recycling. they probably went, oh yeah, the next story, we got the mutts. I found a clause of Axon.
In the Pertwee cupboard, they were like, what else have we got here? What else have we got? Got Bok. Can we use Bok for anything? No.
No, we're doing something with green. Oh, and we'll spray it green. It'd be all right.
Oh, it's a shame they couldn't have got the Eye of Axos back out for this. That would have added more to this story than you could believe.
Your Eye of Axos again.
Although character options must be thrilled that they just repainted the costume. Yeah. Like, yes, one mold, two figures. We're back. Yeah. So what else do you like about Doctor and the Seeds of Doom then? Persuade me.
Well, I'm particularly fond of the way that the story is constructed. As I think I said it in my part of my intro, is that you have this 2 episode setup in Antarctic, and it's almost like 2 separate stories pulled together to make the 6th part, which for me means that the 6 episodes in themselves just don't sag whatsoever.
I feel the first 2 parts could be a little bit more claustrophobic than they are. I don't quite. Maybe the base needs to be a bit more darker. It feels a bit bloodlitty, doesn't it? Like when Doctor and Sarah are sort of tied up on that stuff. I mean, there's some really horrible bits, aren't there? Like, is it Mobley who he tells he's going to have to do the operation? He's like, I can't do it. You've got to help yourself. You're a zoologist. You're best qualified to amputate his arm. Otherwise, he's going to die. I mean, it's
and Tom
quite dark.
Tom's delivering it really well, though, as well throughout this story, and he has done throughout this season. But there's one-liners, and some of these one-liners are quite cutting, and it's kind of, yeah, you're going to do that. It's like, yeah, Tom at his peak here for me in this season.
Is it Tom at his pinnacle?
Peak. I used the word peak then.
I know. I was just checking because I didn't know whether you wanted to slip a pinnacle in that.
No, I'm not putting another pinnacle in here until
you're peaking, are you, Jason?
Well, there's nothing wrong with a peak every now and again, is there?
Oh dear. I feel I must move us on. I mean, it is very, very dark, but you do get. I mean, there's that weird sort of moment at the end where they get back inside the TARDIS, and then it dematerializes and rematerializes in the Antarctic, and you get that whole sort of like, have we arrived before we were supposed to be, or that sort of like, back to that Tom and Liz combination of sparking off each other, which is, you've had this really grim episode, and you end on the 2 of them chuckling away, going back inside the TARDIS. But I think the scenes where they are, this benefits from them being together quite a lot. There's quite a bit of them investigating, trying to escape, etc. And Sarah rescues the Doctor at one point. They work so well together. They look out for each other. So I love that dynamic.
There's that classic one where Tom smashes in through the wind, sort of skylight as well, which I think works really well. It's action Doctor. He's very much more an action Doctor, isn't he? I suppose as in this season, and as opposed to the previous season, I think.
Yeah, and that's weirdly, that was like an image that I remember the most from watching this the first time around, is when he comes through the skylight and sort of, it's. I just think it's really well paced. It's really they're really up against it. It's not just your run of the mill villain. It's the run of the mill villain who's elevated above that. There's the henchman. There's the cast of other people who are under Chase's influence that are also manipulating things behind the scenes. And then you've got the Crinoid on top of that. And I just think that very much in the way that when we did Pyramids of Mars, the threat level was really high. You saw that the world was going to be destroyed unless they did something. You've got the same thing here. The Doctor knows very early on that it's a Crinoid, and he knows what damage. He tells Sarah they eat planets. They migrate in pairs. They eat planets, and he's on that really early on, trying to stop this from happening. So, I think there is that heightened level of peril there as well, which people do criticize by the time the Crinoid is the size of the house and you've just got this sort of green wobbly thing with tentacles and stuff. But I think the real threat and the real sort of horror comes from the fact that it's influencing the plants to kill people by that point. That you can have a rubbery tentacle through the window, that's fair enough. But the fact that if you step outside, the run-of-the-mill plants in the garden are going to kill you. And I think that again adds that element of horror.
Yeah, and it's very much Hammer House of horror this time
Yeah.
round, rather than that sort of old black and white sort of 30s horror. This is definitely down the genre of, all the plants are out to get you. There's an element that's picked up in when they're reading the reports that random gardener a mile down the road has been strangled by his plants, and somebody else has been done, and you can see that the sort of the effect of the crinoid is starting to spread through the intelligence of the sort of the plants. Maybe, I don't know, that they're picking up on the vibe of the crinoid. But it's interesting because Chase dies ultimately, but all the people who helped him are all essentially sacrificed by him. They all die. The butler, he dies a really, he's been there all the way through, supporting Chase all the way through the story. He's almost like the manipulator of all these henchmen. He makes sure everything gets done. He's loyal to the last and dies trying to be loyal and trying to sort of help Chase in his endeavors. It's just so well done, this story. There's not a lot more I can say about it at the moment.
I mean, especially considering that this was a last-minute change, because the Hand of Fear was going to be the final story. But it wasn't ready, so they had to sort of get this together quite quickly to become the end of season. So given that fact as well, I think it's tremendous.
Mm-hmm. And I think as well, you've got the production team on this one. Obviously, you go out of the season with the same production team as you sort of started the season with, if you like. So you've got Camfield and the team there, and again, you wouldn't wish for a better director to come along and take this story on, because action is very much at the forte of Douglas's skill set.
You get a gruesome bit, don't you, talking to the butler, where he brings the raw meat up for Keeler to eat, doesn't he? I mean, it's like you start eating people, it's fine. Although Mark Jones, strange, you can go on my list of unusual Doctor Who fancies. I don't know what it is there. That's a left field one for you boys and girls. It's interesting as well, because I suppose an audience now watching this, as soon as John Challis comes on, is like, it's Boise, and it's really funny because I mean, and he's an actor, and actors can do different things. It's a new concept, but it is really funny that the association this point, because Douglas, he was one of Douglas's sort of proteges, wasn't he? That he's nasty piece of work, and he does it really well. It's just funny, I suppose, the association with John Challis forever, and he did him well for money and everything, and take anything away from it. But he's sort of Boise, and it's funny that you have that association. You sort of almost expect him to have to do a bit of a Marlene or something halfway through it, and he's not going to. There's no reason why he should.
Even down, to the end where they're stuck in the cottage, and he's like, he starts to panic, doesn't he? He has this. He's been the hard man all the way through, and then you see him crack towards the end, and then the doctor's like, "Do you know how to put together a Molotov cocktail?" That's when you have the recipe bit. And as soon as he sort of helps and gets his moment, he escapes. He's like, "Right, I'm off. I'm leaving you to it. I've had enough, and I'm running away."
But he's in blind panic at that point, isn't he? Because the way he can't get out of there fast enough, because the self-preservation of a character like Scorby, he's looking out for number one. Okay, he was Chase's bully boy, for want of a better word, but he is always going to have an eye for looking after himself, and that's part of the character. And it comes down to, again, the character development in these stories in this season particularly has been really good. He single-mindedly just needs to get out of there, because he's got that urge to survive here, because that's in his instinct. And he's that blind panic, he stumbles straight into the water. He doesn't even see it, and then he's sort of dragged to the bottom of the water. So it's the right ending for him, almost to a degree. But you can see the motivation of the character, and the character shines, even though you see Boise now, unfortunately, more so than you would do.
So one of the things the Doctor Who did every year at this point is it did the omnibuses, didn't it? An omnibus repeat. And am I right in thinking, and I could be misremembering it, didn't Philip go through the story to make an abridged version that they then didn't do, and they published? Maybe it was Doctor Who magazine, wasn't it? Or maybe it's in the Hinchcliffe, Aidan Riggles book. I think he wrote what he would have cut out and how he would have brought it down to like a 70-minute movie version. Because they did it with Genesis the year before, didn't they? And Demons and stuff. So it was the sort of thing they did, wasn't it? So interesting to see whether they try that for the box set when it inevitably comes along.
Oh yeah, that would be nice to see, I think. And interestingly, for this story, it's the very last time that we see the original TARDIS exterior prop. Before it's essentially retired. It's been tarted up so many times across the years. But it's the last of the hacky prop, and it's a shame, isn't it? I think that it's the last time we see it. You know, it's amazing to think that prop lasted as long as it actually did.
Didn't it collapse on top of them?
Apparently so, as the story goes.
Smack Lizzie on the once, didn't it? I believe. Right, was it not when they were doing the end scene where she got the bikini and all that stuff? It was. I know we just mentioned that scene, the end scene. I do find it a very odd. I don't think it quite hits the right point somehow. I don't know what it is or what. I get that you want to end the season on a bit of a high. You don't want to have all these people who've been eaten by a plant, and isn't it depressing? I don't know. It just feels a bit odd.
It does feel like a season ending, if you like. And you know, they're off to wherever, and you know, we're just going to leave it on a bit of a high. You almost feel like it might just have been written at the last minute, because obviously of the change around. This wasn't actually originally the end of season story.
Because Liz was supposed to leave, wasn't she, at the end of this season? So I wonder whether they decided last minute that she was going to stay on for the next story, and then they just rewrote the ending.
I don't know if she's meant to leave, was she? Was she not still contracted, and that's why she goes at a funny point next season? I don't know.
She goes in the first story, doesn't she? She's
got 2 more stories after this.
No, maybe not then.
I don't know how it rolled. I can't remember. I'm sure Liz, as she told it, said it was when they were on location for one of the stories. So it could maybe it was the location for this where Philip had said, "What have you thought about, you know, other projects in that subtle way that you might do if you were like, oh, cheers." So maybe it was during, but I don't know if I've ever heard that she was meant to go at the end of this. But I don't know. I can't remember everything. Jason will know though, so if in doubt.
Oh no, I have no idea about this.
Anyway, obviously mentioned Jeffrey Burton's music during Terror of the Zygons. Great stuff again here. Do we have any exotic facts then about Doctor Who and the Seeds of Doom?
Most of which we've covered. It is Robert Banks Stewart lived near Kew Gardens, which is where he said he got some of the inspiration for the crinoid taking over, or the vegetation and sort
he
of
got it in the production office when he was submitting scripts to the Avengers. He's just pretending. Oh, I like that man-eater, a Surrey Green one. What plants growing and taking over, influencing humans? Oh, I might use that again in 7 years' time.
Apparently there's a DVD commentary where he says that he's questioned about the similarity between different things and Day of the Triffids, and he says, you know, that's purely circumstantial. It's just we happen to sort of come from the same idea, that we've just done slightly different. It'd be about plants that are killing people from outer space. So yeah, there's a lot of cross-fertilization, maybe is this the correct terminology.
Oh, a hell of a play on words there.
I know. Who'd have thought? Yeah. Just trying to think of anything else that I heard. No, I think that's it. everything else we have covered.
So, drum roll. I'm gonna take these off because I can't write anything with these on. I've got lovely warm ends now. Let's have some scores then for our final classic series story here.
Oh,
Then Jason's cancelled.
Yes, indeed, I am. So perhaps it's time to go out on a high here, maybe. This is a brilliant end to what has been an outstanding season of stories. And, you know, it's hard to repeat yet again, I suppose. I'm sure you're all fed up of hearing me say this, but this season has absolutely been a delight all the way through. And actually probably the right one for us to do for our last classic review as it goes. A great six-parter because of the way that it's constructed, and this has properly got that 2 and 4 sort of split. The horror dial is turned up to maximum again. And, you know, you've got a dream team of production people behind this, making this story, again, one of those ones you remember. And, I think you guys know, and I've said this a number of times, I grew up watching this era. This is my era of Doctor Who. And these images that came off the screen to an impressionable 6-year-old at the time, no jokes, 6-year-old at the time, absolutely stayed with me. And, you know, I think I spent a lot of my time benchmarking later seasons of Doctor Who, particularly as we got into other Doctors. And I pretty much think I benchmarked a lot against these sort of visuals and the stories that this season and season 12, to be fair, gave us. And, you know, there's some crackers in season 14, but this one season, for me, I think encapsulates classic Doctor Who with Tom Baker at the helm. So great cast, great story. I'm going out with a bang, folks, and we're going for a big old 10 to end it this season.
Ooh.
Never too early for a 10 from the Mary.
It's not, and it's a well-deserved 10 again, and 2 stories with a 10 for me in this season. My scoring system may be criticized at times, but this is a 10 out of 10 classic.
Another pinnacle.
I avoided using that word entirely throughout my summary there.
Before I go into my score, I mean, this is the end of our classic series journey, if you like, and I must say, I now, having done this and gone through every story, I guess my sort of appreciation of different seasons has changed since we started this review, and I am glad that we ended on this one, because I do have a much better appreciation of Tom Baker's era now than I did before. And I think I explained this on a previous recording. I never really watched the Tom Baker ones when I was collecting them on VHS. I primarily focused on Pertwee, McCoy, Davison, the ones that were on while I was watching on telly, or that I'd started watching with my granddad. And so to sort of go back and do the whole Tom Baker era, I do have a much deeper appreciation of it, and I do agree that this is, really good storytelling at this point. Really good. I love the mixture of Doctor Who, sci-fi, horror. All the other sort of things that are thrown into the melting pot. All the different influences that come together, and this is, a really good example of that. I love this story, and it should be no great surprise to hear that I am also giving it 10.
Another 10 from Len.
It is.
Love that. 10 from Len. Haven't heard that for years.
Gonna get my pickled walnuts out.
Wow. Drum roll, if you will, please, then. Yeah, I like Doctor Who and the Season team. Obviously, I've got sympathies with poor Mr. Chase and everyone misunderstanding quite where he's at. I'm still not convinced it's the best of the season, as I'm about to reflect, folks. I will note at this point that it's Ben's favourite Doctor Who story.
Oh, is it?
Oh, Ben.
Jason's just remembered who Ben is. He's going to go, oh yes, I like his rice.
It would be quite funny if Ben just were to pop up in the recording now.
Yes. So anyway, yeah, I'm sort of, yeah, I do think it's a little bit saggy in places. I like a lot of it, but I don't feel it's quite a pinnacle for me. Pinnacle. I might get a little badge of pinnacle in it.
Pinnacle.
So I came in for Doctor Who and the Seeds of Doom on a 7.
Jason's face, I thought you were going to give a 2.
I genuinely thought he was then for a minute.
The moment of fear, I thought, oh my gosh, it's Genesis of the Daleks all over again. Cancel P-Bal. Cancel P-Bal.
No.
So, drum roll, folks. Here come the hot stepper. Turn it up. In 6th place for season 13 is Planet of Evil on 23 points. 23 points is our bottom rung.
Lowest score.
Well,
Wow.
that says a lot about this season for sure.
Oh, well, I perhaps should have read ahead there because Brain and Morbius is also on 23, so that made them joint 5th. Does that help anyone? Morbius and Planet of Evil joint 5th. I'm like Moira Stewart opening the phone lines now. I've got it all wrong. 4th place, just half a point ahead, is Android Invasion on 23.5. 3rd place on 27 points is The Seeds of Doom.
3rd place. And it got 2 10s.
Wow.
2 10s. Who sunk that then?
Ah.
2nd place, and it got 1 10, is Terror of the Zygons on 27.5.
Oh, the criticism still flies for that.
Oh, what are the chances that Season 2 got 2 10s and came below Terror of the Zygons with its 1 10? One might almost say it was a moral victory for the Zygons, but it does mean that the winning story for season 13 on 30 points is Doctor Who and the Pyramids, plural, of Mars.
Yay!
Yay! And a worthy winner of the season. The pinnacle, you might say.
Oh, please don't.
He loved the scripts. He loved all of them.
All of them.
Coming
Every
soon.
single one of them this season.
Coming soon to Redbubble will be a series of T-shirts with Pinnacle, and it's got a great script.
Loved the script. It was Doctor Who. It was Tom Baker. It was Doctor Who. It was written words. It was Doctor Who. I loved everything about the script. So anyway, that's it for 26 seasons we've been through, folks. 26.
My lord, 26 seasons. And it's probably, it's about 2 years now we've been reviewing these?
I was a twink when this started. I have never been I was born with a beard. So it's not the end, though. We are going to be back. We've got a few other exciting things, which, if Jason can find availability for us, we shall be recording.
I shall be about, don't you worry.
You've got to be about when we are as well, though. That's...
Oh. I'm threatened by the lampshade, so I'll be back, don't you worry.
Should be threatened by Ed the Duck. Ed the Duck was much more forthright on his opinions. Anyway, Thank you very much. We will be back, so don't unsubscribe. Like us and subscribe and all that stuff. We're going to be right back at you. This isn't like, at Spice Girls or ABBA or something, where we say, yeah, we'll be back, and then we wait 30 years or something. It's probably like next week. Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, as always.
And yes, indeed, it's been an absolute pleasure as always.
Jason's off to get the pollen out of his carpet.
Yes, I have got a bit of a pollen problem here. That stunt went very horribly wrong.
Sellotape's what you need. You just dab bits of sellotape and it gets it up.
As soon as we stop, I should be off doing that.
Just use that hand movement if you know how to do it.
Oh, I think I'm not doing that. Right.
Okay then. Hope you've all enjoyed that. Like, subscribe, write things below, and we shall see you guys.